You know, especially as a member of the Armed Services Committee, and what we've been seeing this last week, because I want your take on this. We talked about it when you walked in. You know, we've all been witnessing, I don't know, I'll call it at the moment an aborted military coup, you can tell me how to call it, but we're witnessing the Wagner group. I don't know if it maybe gave a little opening to Ukraine, you'll tell me. But what I want to get you to tell everybody is you've been an extraordinary voice for America's support for Ukraine, rallying our allies, and everybody should know right from the beginning of Putin's attack on Ukraine, you were out front, you led a mission, a bipartisan group of senators to Germany, to Poland, to make sure that everybody knew we needed to be there supporting. And I love something that you said. You said defending freedom in Ukraine is defending freedom everywhere. Senator, what's your take on what's happening right now? And I also would love you to talk about why is it important that we continue to support Ukraine, both from a security and an economic point of view going forward for our own interests?
Yes, thank you. And first, I want to say thank you, Liz, as well, for having me here today and for this forum, the Heartland Summit. I think it's so important that we share our voices. And why it's important, America remains a leader around the world. We are, as we mentioned earlier, America is the great convener for so many different nations. We can bring people together where other nations can't. So it's incredibly important that we are out there in front and bringing nations together. When it comes to Russia, I have very strong feelings about what is going on with Russia in regards to Ukraine. And my ties to Ukraine go back very, very far, very deep. I actually spent time in Ukraine in 1989 while I was in between semesters at Iowa State University. And of course, at that point, it was still part of the Soviet Union. But my greatest takeaway from that time in Ukraine, living with a Ukrainian family on a collective farm, was that they were hungering so much for freedom and for opportunity, for the same value system that the United States had. And they expressed it to us quite clearly through questions that they asked. What is it like to be an American? What is it like to be free? And we saw them gain their independence just a few years later, and now we see Russia trying to snatch that away from them. So this is an incredibly deplorable war and loss of life, a loss of independence for Ukraine. And so I am a firm supporter of Ukraine and our military assistance to Ukraine. We do need to make sure that the American public understands why we are there. That is incredibly important. We are providing the equipment for Ukrainian forces, as are many other nations. We are not engaging in our blood. We do not have American men and women that are fighting against the Russians. So I think it's a good opportunity for us to be able to support a friend in Europe, and understanding that if Ukraine falls, that advances Russia into Europe. It advances Russia in opportunities of taking other nations in Europe, and it knocks on the door of NATO. And if they should decide to advance on NATO, that does mean that we will be involved as America in a conflict that we do not wish to see. If you look at our markets around the world, if you look at food insecurity, which I think we'll talk about as well, Ukraine is a great exporter. Just as the United States exports ag goods, so does Ukraine. They are the breadbasket of Europe. They provide food primarily to the Middle East, our Arab partners in the Middle East. There is great instability and vulnerability with the nations in the Middle East. What we would hope to avoid is another Arab Spring. When you have people that are hungry, they turn to violent extremist organizations for their avenue towards prosperity, and when they gain in numbers and strength, then we see those issues. We've seen it in the past, we wish to avoid it in the future.
Well, I couldn't